Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, as well as BaltimorePositive.com. We have so much going on here, man. We got a football aftermath of a very, very big victory over the Buffalo Bills, but we're going to table that till at least what point we get to Cincinnati or the Orioles are on to New York maybe on Saturday night. It is a big, big week around here. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour next Friday, the 11th, which will be between game 4 and 5 of the ALDS. I had a day where we could do it. It's Luke's birthday, my birthday. We're combining it. We're going to Pizza John's. We're giving away these very lucky Raven scratch-offs. I had a very lucky batch at Fadley's last week, as well as at Costas, where I gathered and talked about all of my Capital Center memories. And I got to pull all my ticket stubs out, so I found a lot of my Memorial Stadium memories by pulling all that stuff out. And I have a lot of oyster memories from last month. Our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions have sent me out for 26 oysters in 26 days. 1-800-CLEAN WATER. They take care of your water this way the oysters take care of the bay water. And our friends at the Oyster Recovery Partnership. Jiffy Lube's got Luke going back and forth from Owings Mills to Camden Yards. My next guest will be pleased to know that I have written a letter to Mr. Rubenstein on behalf of the fact that I am banned yet again. Second ownership. I haven't even done anything to this guy yet, other than tell the truth, which I'm about to do. So there'll be a Dear David Rubenstein letter out this week as well. And our friends at Curia Wellness and Foreign Dot are also powering up our 26th anniversary for 26 oysters that I now have in my belly. We're going to be announcing all that and all the cool oysters we've had out at Baltimore Positive beginning on October 1st, which is when the postseason begins. Alan McCallum is our defending champion. He's been at this for, a little over 3 decades and doing this here. I've been at it 33 years. I've known him about 30. Right about now, 31 maybe at this point. No, 29. I don't know. Dude, I lose track of it. Are they going to win a playoff series? I mean, that's what I need to know. Are you and I going to have to reconvene on Friday and maybe pull you away from your very important work down at the and I know the guy that runs the board. He probably give you the night off. Maybe you could sit behind home plate with me in the Bronx on Saturday night. What do you think, Alan? We gonna win some baseball games this week or what?
I certainly hope so. I certainly don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility, but you know, the Kansas City Royals are as incentivized to win as we are, I'm sure. So let the games begin.
How you feel? Be honest with me here. I mean, um, in your perfect world, nobody gets hurt. They win 104 games. They beat the Yankees by 6 games. They're sitting around icing their pitching. One of the reasons they're not icing their pitching is their pitching wasn't good enough to ice, let alone the bullpen. So there is some validity to going out and doing this. I mean, I had Barry Bloom on a couple weeks ago, who he would tell you that, he saw Cy Young pitch. I don't know if he did or didn't. I'm making that up, but he remembers when baseball was baseball and real men were real men, and you went out and took the ball and went 8 innings in the post, like all of that. But more or less than that is this weird part where the best teams go ice themselves for a week, hitters and pitchers, all of it. And I don't know that that's been real good in the modern vernacular. It certainly wasn't good for the Orioles last year. They never won another game.
Historically, it has not been good for teams. There have only been a few teams that have gotten through after sitting for a week. Baseball is a game that's played every day. How do I feel? Yes, it's possible. We convened 2 weeks ago to talk about the ills of the second half of the Orioles. They finished with 91 wins, 10 wins less than last year. And for all the hand-wringing and the stress and I can't believe this is happening through July and August and September, if I told you that the team that won 101 games last year, traded for Corbin Burns, was expected to come back strong, and then Grayson Rodriguez, Kyle Bradish, John Means, and consistently 2 or 3 of their best relievers were going to be out for the better part of the season, and that they were going to lose Jordan Westberg, Ryan Mountcastle, and the guys that were ultimately going to play second base in Ramon Urias and Jorge Mateo for various periods of time. And the guy that they were expecting to be their best prospect wasn't ready yet. We're hoping that's all it was. And they finished with 91 wins. You'd say, sign me up, right? I know I would. Ultimately, you're talking about maybe 2 or 3 wins less over the course of 3 months to get them to 91 wins. It's really hard to talk about firing Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias and anybody else when you look at it that way. Not to mention that this team was clearly going through a transition between the veteran guys, particularly the outfielders that carried them through years of struggle into promising winning, to find a way to bring their young guys in. I mean, that was clearly going on this team. With all of that, they win 91 games. They finished with the top wild card seed. It's really, really hard to argue with all the things that happened when you look through the season with that filter. Regardless, they put themselves in the position where you can't scream about icing. You can't say they don't have a shot. Clearly, they do. And getting a few of the guys back late in the season, you could see the team immediately be something very different over the last week as they got Mountcastle and Westberg and Urias back. And I will say this, of all the things that happened offensively for this club over the course of the summer, I would tell you that Jordan Westberg, at least from the offensive and defensive standpoint, was really the linchpin for a lot of the struggles. Westberg is a settling force in this lineup. He certainly settles down the infield. He gives the club a right-handed presence, either at the top or down further in the order, that really gives them balance. He's a professional hitter. He gives you consistently really strong at bats. I'm not telling you that was all that happened, but I think this team changed dramatically when they lost Jordan Westberg to the hand injury, and getting him back, whether he gets a hit or not, there is a professional, strong presence from a young guy that feels like a veteran that really helps to establish this club in a very different way. And having him back, I feel like is a strong piece to say the Orioles have a shot to do this. Kansas City has a good lineup, exceptionally strong starting pitching. We're gonna face our demon right away, in the sense that who would you rather have, Bobby Witt Jr. or Adley Rutschman? Well, hello, because it's right here to have that argument. And I think that a lot of it's going to do with whether Vinny Pasquantino is in the lineup for them or not over the next 2 to 3 games, because that lineup, much like Jordan Westbrook for the Orioles, is entirely different when they have him in the middle of theirs, and it helps balance out their roster. So we're gonna find out a lot of things very quickly once they start playing.
Alan, I watch a lot of baseball, so have you, and it's rarefied air to get into this. And we're always watching the other teams play and how they match it up, and how every game's a game 7, right? Like, that's the thing. The fans going down to the ballpark, 8th inning of Tuesday, you're playing it like it's game 7. You're playing for your balls, you're playing for extra innings, you're playing for whatever you have to play for. Not worry. I mean, we'll figure out Wednesday's bullpen when we get to Wednesday, and hope that Eflin gets his 5 or 6 innings, right? Like, and you hope that he comes to post, and wherever Kramer and Suarez and whatever you need, you make it happen on Tuesday and Wednesday. So there's that desperate brand of baseball that everybody plays. Once you get into this, and it's not as much in a 7-game series or 5, but when you're getting these, you lose today.
Series, man.
Yeah, it creates drama that didn't exist years ago. It creates a really unfair balance for what's a good team and a bad team, and how teams get knocked out. I think the sitting and icing teams sounds good in football. Hasn't worked that great in football for the Ravens either, or for other teams either, sitting around and getting cold. But the pitching side of this, and where the Orioles pitching is, where they wanted it to be, and you go through the starters and where all that, this is where Luke becomes, when he and I get together, I have to beat him up a little bit, because he goes into the valley a little bit of concern, the valley of despair, in regard to the bullpen, that
Sure.
If they're going to win, they're going to hit home runs, and they're going to be much better with runners in scoring position, and or sweep the bases a couple of times when they have some runners on. They can be 2 for 7 runners in scoring position, as long as both times they were 3-run home runs. Yeah, right? Literally, right? The other times, whatever, right? But if they can get to 6 or 7 or 8, they can count that high. Specifically in these games, they should be able to win some games here and stack something and get into the weekend. They play well against New York. They're not intimidated by the Yankees. The Yankees will be a little bit more iced, and just there's all of that. But these next couple of days, and how the pitching can hold up and how it can hold up after, let's say, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth inning. If you tell me they're going to have a clean sheet after the sixth inning both days, they're going to be playing this weekend. They are. I mean, because I think they'll hit the ball later in the game, right? Because I think they'll hit. I think they're a better team. I'm not going to judge them. Last time you and I got together, like maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, like is this
Yeah.
guy coming back? Is that guy coming back? Is Mount? Where's Westberg? Where's the bullpen? Where's the left hander? Where's Colomb? Is he throwing strikes? A little worried about Cano because I think he could be a saving grace for them, and they would definitely need innings out of a guy like him, if not him, the next couple of days. But this isn't about next week or next month or the Yankees this weekend or Saturday night. Um, as Tommy Conwell once sang in "It's Not Your Man," the revised version, there ain't no tomorrow, baby. There's just right now.
Look, the best of three is a heck of a lot different than the best of seven. Game one is absolutely crucial. And look, a year ago, we had two starters that you thought could really had a chance to get you through, and then Dean Kramer. And this year, you have two starters that you really think have a chance to get you through, and then Dean Kramer. And the difference is the two guys this year are veterans in Burns and Eflin as opposed to Rodriguez and Bradish. Although Bradish pitched really well in that game one. But you have to look to them, particularly in this series, and say, we need to lean on those veterans to get us through from a starting standpoint. This club, obviously, you need Burns and Eflin to be those guys, right? That's how you get through this part of the series. I think defense is going to be key. And as I said, I think the infield defense is much better with Urias and Westberg in to help settle down that infield. But you're going to need 5 or 6 innings at least from Burns and Eflin. This is obviously, as much as the postseason has evolved into this thing where bullpens take hold, I don't know that this is a club that you say, hey, we're going to try and get 4 or 5 from our starter, particularly in a 3-game series, and then we're going to turn to the bullpen to get us through, because that's not this club. I think you want to try and get 6 or 7 out of Burns and Eflin, and then use 2 or 3 guys to get you through 2 games. I think they want to try and win this game in this series in the first 2 games. The problem is that Cole Regans, as much as Seth Lugo had a great year, Cole Regans is a lefty, and if there's anything that should scare the Orioles, it's a quality lefty coming at them. And
Well, especially when McCann's going to be the catcher, right? I mean, and Rutschman will be a DH, right? So it's how they balance this lineup, and it's really who hits in Tuesday. I mean,
well, I got to
it's
tell
a
you,
handful of at bats. It's a very small sample size, and it's very, very situational. And the shadows matter, I think. And
yeah,
there's all sorts of things going to be happening here that ain't like any other game we play around here, other than the Zach Britton game that, I still remember, in Toronto. I watched a game of Buffalo Wild Wings and just sort of like shaking my head because you remember every situation about these kind of games because they're so magnified.
I remember Messina in Cleveland in the 90s, and he pitched brilliantly. And I think he had something like 14 strikeouts or some ridiculous number. And
Nobody could see the ball.
they're right. They were talking to him after the game how brilliant he was. And it was just the most honest thing I've ever seen an athlete say. It's like, they couldn't see the ball coming out of my hand. And it was true. I mean, he was still
By
good.
the way, his brother argued that with me on the internet, and I was at his locker in Cleveland with you. And now that you said it out loud, I remember him saying that to me because Moose and I were pretty close. He's like, they couldn't see the ball.
Right.
Like literally, and I argued that because Mark was last postseason was making some ish about this and that, and I'm like, you do know your brother admitted, and he fought with me. By the way, I invited him on today too. He should get in the middle of you and me one day. I mean, maybe we should have him down for that network viewing party so he can see Ned Beatty with his finest work.
Mark Messina is welcome at my home anytime.
Better your home than mine. He eats too much pizza.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, if it's going to be as rainy over the next couple of days as it looks, maybe the shadows won't play as much. But bottom line is, if the Orioles need to hit a quality lefty, And that's right now, that's the way. If you ask me how to beat the Orioles, definitively, how do you beat the Orioles? I'll tell you, throw a quality lefty at them, and that could shut down the club. Now, you mentioned James McCann, and I got to tell you, there's a part of me that thinks, why not start James McCann in every game? Because I don't know that Adley Rutschman is the guy I want to lean on, based on the second half of his season. That
Where are
said,
you with him? Where are you with him, with Rutschman? How do you, I mean, you feel like he's hurt?
yeah, I think he has a hand injury. I think that, I mean, if you look at the numbers after he got hit on the hand, I mean, it's clear. That said, uh, when before they drafted him, I said to you, I wouldn't draft a catcher at number one. And the reason I felt that was that catchers have more put on them than any other athlete, maybe in sports. It's very hard to stay, even the best hitting catchers, it's very hard to keep them healthy and ready all the time. Uh, and ultimately, if you're drafting a guy to rebuild a team and to be good potentially for years to come, the most unpredictable player, other than a pitcher, to do that with is a catcher. Not to mention that Bobby Wood Jr., I mean, his pedigree just looked outstanding. Adley has been there's. I said this to you and Max in the middle, I guess maybe in early June when the Orioles were killing it. There's no question that the moment Adley Rutschman came up to the major leagues, this team changed. No question about it. And we could talk forever and not be sure why that is, but obviously Adley is a positive presence, and has done a ton for this team. That said, if you look at his offensive history since coming up, it's just very wax on, wax off. He walked too much. Then he swung the bat too much. And it always feels like he's trying to find his balance. He was having a very solid season, no question about it, going through this year. But yeah, I think he has a hand injury, and it's hard. It's hard to talk about him and not think about what this lineup. Just imagine for a split second if Bobby Witt Jr. was playing short and Gunnar Henderson was playing third, because that's something that could have happened for this club. Um, just to think about that, but there's no point in doing that because Bobby Witt Jr. is probably going to be a lifelong Royal at this point. Um, I I believe that Adley Rutschman is going to have a strong career for the Orioles. Based on this year, it's hard to know what's going to come. But having James McCann, who's swinging the bat well, except for the moments when he lets it go, it's hard to say that he wouldn't be the better presence right now. Not to mention the numbers with him behind the plate for both Burns and Eflin.
Alan McCallum is our guest. He's our longtime baseball friend, my movie buff, even though I don't see movies except when I'm at Alan's house, and they have to be from the 1970s, and Max Weiss has to be involved from Baltimore Magazine. We can belabor this, and I want to get you back on. I hope that there's more baseball to talk about this weekend. I hope to drag you off to New York and try to have a little bit of fun through this. I do hope you read my letter to David Rubenstein because
I will.
it's disgraceful for both of these franchises to try to Texas chainsaw Luke Jones to covering both teams this week, where we won't have a representative at Ravens camp on Wednesday and Thursday because they've decided to discriminate against me and not allow me to come. So, or my company. So I'm pissed off about it. I should be pissed off about it. My audience should be pissed off about it. If you love me and care about my mental health, you'd be pissed off about it. And certainly it's just wrong. So I will say that. That being said, this part of the baseball journey, and I'm writing this to Rubenstein about like how much money are you going to spend? Who are you signing? What's the investment? Are you hiring Janet Marie to fix the stadium up? Who's Katie Griggs? Is she going to come out and actually meet people? Like all the above, right? All the above. And one of the things I'm writing to him is there's been a lot of trauma here with Peter Angelos, right? And the
Sure.
trauma moves further if they lose 2 games here and they're asleep by Wednesday night and they got 7 hits in 2 games. I mean, you know, I've watched it the last 2 months. That being said, they could win 12-2 in game 1 and 7-3 in game 2. And I mean, Luke and I are paying tolls and stopping to pee on the turnpike on the way to New York on Saturday, right? There's a point for this look, this time last year they were showering John Angelos in the locker room, and he was telling Wes Moore, "We got a deal that we don't," like all of that, right? So things happen quickly.
Sure.
Rubenstein's been involved in all of this, and it's a new thing. They bought Eflin, right? I mean, his first purchase was go get me a pitcher, right? I mean, Bradish is hurt. We'll spend money to have a game one starter. They thought game one might have
Mission
been Bradish,
accomplished.
right? Right? What's that?
Mission accomplished.
Right. So here we are. They have the Milwaukee Brewers Cy Young Award winner because they were willing to pay him and pay for him, something we never had before, which was prospects to get a guy, let alone to pay him the $20 million it was going to cost to start game one. Game one. I've talked about game one, game one, game one ever since the last game one. Because when you lose game
Yeah.
one, bad stuff happens. So they have a game one starter that's a Cy Young. He was great early.
Good in September.
Not so great in the middle, decent, more than decent at the end. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the Eflin thing only happened because everybody else's arms fell off, right? So they made that happen and they made a deal to make that happen. But that deal was about a bag of baseballs and $18 million next year and picking up his salary. And is he good enough? And the old ownership never would have done that. So, right. So, like, even in a good year, the old ownership wouldn't have done that, especially when they were trying to, like, get Acme brand ketchup at the end because they were selling the place and getting rid of it and liquidating because mama needed the check and the kids were nuts. So all of that we've endured as fans and how that relates to who's on the hill, who's on the bump, as Ben McDonald would say, but there's no Ben McDonald, there's no Jim Palmer this week, so we get different company, we get different observations. Place is going to be loud, there's going to be bunting, aren't going to be any Royals fans. It's going to be all us for $65. You can get out of the game. Might be $30 by the time the game starts on Tuesday. Um, Burns and Eflin, right? Never would have seen this coming this time last year, right? Never would have seen new ownership coming last year. Never would have seen Cal Ripken sit behind home plate last year. $40 million worth of pitcher. We're going to see next 2 days, right? And the only reason we're seeing $40 million of it, our guys' arms fell off.
Yeah.
Rodriguez, Bradish, Means, just go down the list. Wells. That was the rotation this time last year. They would have dreamed up a four last year. It would have been Bradish top, Rodriguez two. Forget Kramer, Suarez. Forget, even though he's Venezuelan, and they do forget about the Venezuelans down there. I checked the press gate.
Nobody knew who Suarez was in April of this year, let alone last year.
All of that, right? All of the above. We could talk about all of it, but this is really, and Mr. Rubenstein, although I'm taking you behind the woodshed, you and the Whistler, for denying me a press credential based on something a dead guy thought about me, quite frankly, who picked the fight because he never punched down. Disgraceful. All of it's been disgraceful. All of it that I've witnessed. But I'm still watching, and I still go Orioles and all of that. But this is really about the owner ponying up money for two pitchers to try to get you into next week, because where the hell would they be if they didn't spend money? I mean, seriously, right? Like, so who would be?
Absolutely.
Dean Kramer would be starting game one, and there would be no game one because there would have been no Burns here. There would have been no Calvary. Kate Povich would have had a 7 ERA and made 26 starts. That McDermott kid that wasn't right. Like, that's what they would have been doing. That's what
Yeah.
they always did. So there is
They
a
would have
point for
traded for some.
Rubenstein where I'm not going to kiss his ass this week while he's restricting my press pass. I'm going to kiss his ass here on the radio and say, somebody's paying for this.
They would have traded for somebody's number three, maybe a surprise number two that was 34 and a guy whose a contract was expiring. They would have done something like that. So there would have been somebody else in the rotation. But Burns and Eflin are both legit for real guys you would expect to see starting in the first two games of a postseason playoff series. So, yeah, I mean, for all the things that have happened, they've got literally two of the best out there for the first two games, and we'll see where that puts them. It got them to 91 wins, and it gets them to a point where they can look across the field at Kansas City Royals and say, we're going to give you everything we've got. So you can't argue with that. Certainly not.
The point for me in believing that I'll be in New York this weekend and next week when I'm giving away these Raven scratch offs from the Maryland Lottery, and we're having birthday pizza and cake and ice cream, and get Luke those little brownie fudge top things, black bottom brown, whatever they call those things. They're delicious. Little cheesecakes over there, little raspberry cheesecakes and milkshake. I'm gonna get Luke a milkshake for his birthday and a pepperoni pizza, and I'm getting a crab cake as well. I
Not
don't
me.
know if
You're
they're.
not getting a crab cake in New York.
I'm getting a crab cake at Pizza John's next Friday. It's Crab Cake Tour,
Excellent.
Maryland Crab Cake Tour, presented by the Maryland Lottery, in conjunction with Jiffy Lube. Um,
Excellent.
so so next Friday, if they're still playing baseball on October 11th, it's like the case to be made for that, and the belief in that is starting pitching's good enough. Bullpen is suspect, but capable of winning a game or two, of getting three
Absolutely.
guys out against the Royals in the eighth inning and the ninth inning. Um,
There is
they
nothing about this bullpen. There's nothing in this bullpen that makes you say they can't win a game with the bullpen. They have guys that have quality arms and can get guys out for a short time. Um, they also have guys that can fall apart very quickly. But all of them are capable. I mean, from Soto to Yanir Cano, Danny Kulam, they've all done it at one time or another. Um, there's no question about it. They just have to. Right now, they need to turn it on. Period. But they can do it.
Somebody's going to turn it on and win a World Series, and I don't know necessarily
Yeah.
think it's the Dodgers or I think it's the Indians because of their bullpen. Or I mean, turning it off and then turning it back on this weekend. Wake me next Monday after the Ravens hopefully beat the Bengals and go to 3-2. 2-3 wouldn't be good. Losing the Bengals wouldn't be good. But wake me next Monday, and I'll let you know how this Dodgers, Phillies, Yankees, Indians, everybody sits around iced, and who's up 2-0 and who's down 2-0 and who's 1-1 and where we are once we get into that next round. Because look, man, this next 48 hours, 72 hours, it is really a roll of the dice, as Buck would say, right? Like anything can happen here, but they're not overmatched. They're not in over
No.
their heads. I'm not even particularly upset that they're not the one seed and taking the week off, because I think there's a benefit to going to Yankee Stadium Saturday where they're not afraid of that. And there's a point where our fans will get on buses and go up there a little bit and probably have a little bit of fun over the weekend on Saturday and into Monday. I know Luke and I are strongly considering watching the Bengals and Ravens game from some sequestered location somewhere in the Bronx, or maybe I'll take him over to Brooklyn. Brooklyn's they got better pizza in Brooklyn on a Sunday, so maybe I'll take him over there. But I'm dreaming a little bit. Alan, I mean, I'm writing basically an FU to the owner for locking me out. I've waited my whole life for them to play playoff games. I've waited 41 years for them to win the World Series on behalf of my father. So they can hate me all they want, and Greg Bader can tell the whole world I'm a bad guy and all that. But I don't want them to lose this week. I want to be in New York this weekend. I want to see the community engaged. I want to see people out. I want to see it fun. And I told Luke this, and I guess we can close and we can even get together again later. Hopefully we will, because they'll keep playing. I want you and Luke and Luke's mother. I don't want to say I don't care anymore, because they don't care about me, right? They've been trying to put me out of business 2 ownerships deep now. So I'm now caring more about the $600 million and how they're spending that and what Mr. Rubenstein's really going to do to sustain this. That this isn't a one-off, especially if they go out 2 games, because they get the
Absolutely.
bat stuffed up their ass. Because then you have to wait another year, and there's another 40 million you have to put in the pitching, and it's another year. Are we going to give Gunner 300 million? And they can hide from me, and he can hide doing his television show and send the whistler out to yell at me and yell "shut up" at me 6 times and treat me like a sewer rat. But I'm going to hold him accountable the way I held the other old man accountable, the way I'm going to hold Michael Arrighetti accountable, and Priscilla, all of them, for what they're going to do to manage this operation and manage our city and manage this asset. I'll hold all that accountable. But in the meantime, this is what it's all about. It's about making a memory. This is what I said to Luke. The Delman Young thing, to me, no offense, it's almost laughable for anybody that's had real memories of winning championships, what every other fan base has been through for 41 years. Luke was born 2 weeks before they won the World Series, right? Like, do you have any
Wow.
memories of 83? You weren't even a fan in 83, right? At all, right?
I was a fan. I was. I mean, I was 11, and
It
Is that right?
wasn't
Yeah.
as important to you then as it was when you were 21, right?
Oh, of course not. I mean, but I mean, look, I remember distinctly the Orioles lost the first game of the World Series, and I remember my dad and I were going to the Giant on Liberty Road. That was my Giant until they closed it about a year ago, a little more than a year ago. Before the game, getting ice cream, and I was really scared. And I said, "Dad, can the Orioles still win the World Series?" And he laughed at me. He said, "Of course they can." And there was genuine excitement. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly dyed in the wool, black and orange, in a way I was now, in a way that I wasn't then. Um, it's been a long, dark road. I mean, it's hard to imagine the Orioles winning the World Series. I had a dream in the '90s that the Orioles won the World Series, and I remember for like a year, I kept thinking, did they win the World Series? And I forgot about it. And I was like, and I had to convince myself that it was a dream because it felt so real. That's the closest thing to the feeling that I've had in the last 40 years. But look, this is the weirdest season for baseball that I can ever imagine. There were some dominant clubs, and the Orioles were one of them. And then all of a sudden they weren't. And they all weren't at the same time. And then all these mediocre teams got really good, and then they weren't. So there's nobody in this field right now. There is not one team that you look and say, that team is ticketed to win the World Series. None of them. The Orioles have as much, because they're all flawed. They're all, you name a team, and I can give you a scenario for them to win the World Series. Probably the team best suited to win the World Series is the San Diego Padres, and they're as flawed as anybody else, although they have the pieces on paper to look really good. But
There was
if
some
the
about
Orioles,
momentum, I would say, right? Like
yeah,
Tigers sort of had it a little bit, like where it is, and you're playing well or you're not playing well, and the Padres certainly playing well. I mean, hell, the Mets and the Braves are playing to try to get in. Arizona's waiting to get on a plane. Like it is a little chaotic for
it's chaotic.
everyone, and just the fact that it's going to be chilly, cloudy,
Yeah,
shadows falling later in the day, weird game. It's just all of it, and the that Delman Young moment, that moment that happens in the middle of a game that can only happen in a game in October. You can water hose all you want, squirt all you want, bring Joan Jett and Cal Reed, do whatever you all that. You can get bobbleheads out. You can hit walk-off home runs in May. You can do all of that. I mean, the only thing people really remember is Delman Young. I mean, literally, I told Luke, and
I mean,
this is Luke's
I
Christian and
remember
Catholic.
Delman
I
Young.
said I said to Luke, the Pope, Cal Ripken, and Delman Young. That's about it. That's about 32 years. That's about it, really. Bro, Springsteen and Billy Joel.
I got to tell you, I mean, Delman Young is my most fond playoff memory. I was there to see it. I've seen some games in the postseason, but that was incredible. So I mean, and they didn't win the World Series. So I mean, that for me, that's what I have to hold on to. So I'm most certainly aware of the glory years for the Orioles. I was too young. I was either not alive or too young to really hold on to them in that way. Look, the Detroit Tigers getting into the postseason is the strangest thing I can remember seeing in a long time. I know the Rockies had a really incredible run back in the day when Matt Holliday, Jackson's father, was their leader. I remember that. But watching the Tigers get into the postseason, I still can't quite believe that happened. But if you look at momentum, they certainly are the team that you would say. But that said, it feels like they iced themselves a little bit against the White Sox in the weekend prior to the end of the season. So we'll see. There are a lot of clubs. Momentum has certainly been a driver in the last decade of Major League Baseball's postseason. And if you look at momentum, then yeah, the Padres, the Tigers, maybe the Braves or the Mets after a bizarre doubleheader on the Monday after the season ends. I can't see how the Diamondbacks get in because if whoever wins game one, you've got to believe they're going to play their B team in game two and save their best starter for game one of the postseason. So I can't see the Diamondbacks winning it. Stranger things have happened, I guess. But yeah, there are a lot of weird things that happened in this season for the field to look the way it does. And I'm hoping that will make for a really exciting postseason with the Orioles coming out on top. It will have been a long time coming, uh, and I think we're all ready for it if it does.
Al McCallum is here. He is always here. He's omnipresent. We got to table this network movie night till we have evenings free, and hopefully that lingers into early November. Ravens taking on Cincinnati this week. Luke will not be in Owings Mills because he will be at Camden Yards. I will not be in Owings Mills. See Chad Steele. There's some letters up at Baltimore Positive. I'm writing a letter to David Rubenstein, who's also banned me from Oriole Park at Camden Yards, along with his crew, which is just really disappointing after 18 years of waiting for new ownership and waiting for this kind of baseball team and these kinds of games. Luke will be sitting in the WNST seat in the Oriole Park press box. I will be here doing my thing. WNST tech service back and available. If you hear Luke's voice, not mine, because Luke sends it. It's all brought to you by Cole Roofing. If you want to join that service, it's 410-821 WNST. Just send the word join and you are on the tech service. Obviously, everywhere we go, Baltimore Positive goes around the world. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour back after it next Friday with our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I'll have these Ravens scratch-offs to give away, as well as our friends at Jiffy Lube Multicare. And the Maryland Oyster Tour is about to conclude, at least for me, having 26 oysters in 26 days. I'll be platforming those in October because it's Oyster Month, and the Oyster Recovery Partnership last week taught me a whole bunch of stuff. So, man, I've seen so many friends. I've eaten so many interesting oysters. Some of the videos are up at YouTube. I'll be getting that stuff out to Baltimore Positive. And I'm really hoping to circle back with some folks at the Federal House down in Annapolis. My new buddy Finn out at Mama's on the Half Shell, Scunny's son, who I had an oyster with Scunny's son the other day. And I think we're going to do the crab cake tour out there. By the way, my kid turned 40 last week, Alan. How's
I
that make you
know.
feel? Weird?
Uh, I remember Barry following me around asking me about Star Wars, and I think he was like 12. So it makes me feel old. It makes me feel depressed, and it makes me feel excited and proud of the man that he's become. But it's a sobering reality that Barry has turned 40, and I'm 52. But
Well, I've already
the world does not
referenced,
stop spinning.
yeah, I've referenced Messina in this reference with Mark, and I invited him on. He couldn't come on. I invited Howard Scher on, Humpin' Howie, who was my original ballpark reporter, along with Tom Cap and you many, many moons ago, and Mike Wargo and Eric Turner and a whole bunch of other people that I'm still good friends with. Who've gone on to lead better lives outside of sports journalism like you. So you don't live long enough to be the banned Latino guy in both programs here after supporting them publicly for 33 years on the radio. It's disgraceful. Both of you, all of you, you know who you are. But I would also say this. My kid went down to Ocean's Calling on Friday night. And I woke up at 3 in the morning because I've been writing this Dear David Rubenstein letter because I want him to know exactly how I feel about things. And I woke up at 3 in the morning and there was a video of my daughter-in-law of them getting pounded by the rainstorm, by the tropical storm,
I
Helene.
thought
Yeah. So that went up and I put up, I'm like, I've never been more simultaneously appalled and really proud of you for being out at an Offspring concert and Blink-182 just getting pounded with rain after his 40th birthday, mind you. This isn't some dumb, I'm going to get in the car with Glenn Clark. We're going to drive all night to Atlanta to see Dave Matthews when you're 17. No, this is 40 years old out on a beach with 100,000 people getting pounded in rain. So for my kid, big thumbs up for that. I must
absolutely.
say. So, yeah. So very, very proud of him and, proud of all of our operation. We made it through another year to get back to Oriole playoff games and into another season. We're having fun around here, right?
Absolutely. Speaking as a person who makes his living with live music performances, I encourage every human being on earth to continue to go to see music live because there is nothing quite like it. Yeah, Barry is a fine man, and I'm happy that he has made it through this way. And I'm excited that we're here talking 2 years in a row about Orioles baseball going into October and having a chance to win the World Series because I remember many a year talking to you about what the future hopes would be in May of an Orioles season as opposed to October in the future. In the future is right now. So more power to them, and let's see if we can get this thing done this year.
He's 40, and the last time that the Orioles had back-to-back playoff seasons, he was 13. And I remember vividly broadcasting from Balls that night, and I had a ticket for him right off of third base. I was going to take him to the ALCS. Yankees were in, and he looks at me. He's like, "Dad, I don't feel good. I think I'm going to throw up." I'm like, it was 20 minutes before the game. We're 2 blocks away. I'm like, get in a cab. I gave the cabbie $20. I said, take him to my mother's house in Colgate, take him to East Point right now, and cell phones and all that. But he missed the playoff game and he never had a chance to go again. This is
Oh, wow.
97, not 96. So I took him to one playoff game in Philly when they played a wild card game against like Colorado in 2005, like a long time ago, back in the Howard era and the
Jimmy
Chase Utley
Rollins.
era, right?
Yeah.
J Roll, all that, right? So this is almost 20 years ago. And I had my Sisto Lescano Phillies bubble pee on from the 83 World Series. But I did get to take Barry to the American League Championship Series. He and I were sitting at Reggie's drinking beer 10 years ago. I had him come downtown. I was on whatever StubHub, whatever. I said, dude, we're going to buy tickets at 7:10. We're going to have a nice Reggie fries and a cheeseburger and delicious crab tots or whatever they were. And sure enough, I clicked on 2 tickets. We walked up to the ballpark. I think I bought us a couple of tickets for about $75, maybe $80. We were right at third base, about 10 rows behind the dugout. Bought the tickets game night. I think it was game 2, if I'm not mistaken, because we went to Kansas City and lost. So I did get to take my kid to the American League Championship Series. So don't think I'm a bad parent. All right. I don't want you thinking I'm a bad parent. All right.
Certainly not.
All right. I'll take you to New York this week. We'll have fun.
I want to point out that I'm wearing the Angry Bird. No more, no smiley faces. No
Dun, dun,
letter
dun,
B.
dun, 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 dun,
I want them to go out and
dun,
bash some
dun,
people
dun.
metaphorically in the head with their baseball bats as they crush the baseball out of the ballpark. I want them to be mean. I want them to be serious. I want them to take the field and knock it out of the park.
Start spreading the news. Last time you and I got together in the Bronx to watch a playoff game,
I'm well aware of what happened in that game. Yes, a kid reached over the fence and took a game one winning opportunity away from the Baltimore Orioles. I remember it vividly.
have you watched the documentary yet?
I've watched a lot of stuff about it. I can't say that I've watched. Not sure I
Please
remember
go
watching
watch the documentary. It's at the front of WNST. It has a moment in it that has that moment in it. There's a moment in my documentary. Greg Landry at Towson Transfers and Blue Rock put it together, and he saw that piece of the video. He's like, that's going in. And I did a television show the morning after that in New York. I did like American Edition or whatever, Nancy Glass. And that part of the documentary is Tony Tarasco in that moment. And I tell that story, Alan, all the time because you, me, and Scott Garceau, who's a real media guy, unlike you and me, because, why would you and the Venezuelan guy have a press pass? Why would that ever happen? But our vantage point of that, where you and I sat, I tell people about that. Now, dude, it's been 28 years. It's been 28 years. But
Yeah.
you and I and Garceau had a sight line to that because the alternate press box was in the right field corner underneath what we would used to call the mezzanine or the lower reserve in Memorial
Right.
Stadium. Terrace
Right.
box low. It was more lower reserve. If it could have rained all day and we wouldn't have gotten wet at Yankee Stadium. We were undercover. But we had a perfect vantage point of the foul pole. And I'll never forget it as long as I live that kid's arms were over and we saw it diagonally. We had a vantage point that the umpire didn't have, or that no camera that I've ever seen where my eyes saw it. There was no camera from that angle. And I know you were on my right shoulder. I remember it vividly.
I must have looked like an idiot as I'm pointing and I'm saying to you, did you see that? Because it was so clear, and Tarasco was losing his mind. And let's just remember, I mean, the New York Yankees, the Derek Jeter, Bernie Williams, the core four, all that started with that series. And just imagine for a second, the Orioles go home 2-0 in that series, and the Yankees don't go to the World Series. is the legend of Derek Jeter the same? I mean, does he go on to be that guy? I mean, there's certainly nothing to say he wouldn't, but that one moment in history really might have turned a corner for both the Orioles and the Yankees in a way that, as a Baltimore Orioles fan, I will wonder about that the rest of my life because it was a very significant moment. And you look back now with instant replay in the sport, how different that might have gone in that situation as well. It's one of those. If you ever watched the show Quantum Leap, and I'm a nerd, so I did. Uh, and they talk about how one moment in time can change the course of history, and you just really feel like that was a linchpin moment that we witnessed.
I feel that way about John Harbaugh's Hall of Fame candidacy. That Jacoby Jones didn't have that one moment. There would be none of that. And Joe's still playing, by the way. Joe's still throwing the ball. Joe's still throwing touchdowns. And I've lived long enough to see him in a Colts helmet. It's just some really, really strange stuff going on in the world today. And I hope that I'm back at Yankee Stadium and thinking about Tony Tarasco and Jeffrey Mayer. I'll go to the game with Jeffrey. I'm going to invite Jeffrey Mayer on Saturday night if I can find him to sit with him, and I'm going to invite you up too. We got to win a couple games here this week. All right,
Just
Royals and
make sure you're
Orioles.
not behind just make sure you're not behind an outfield wall in fair territory,
And
okay?
I'm busy as hell this week, and I'm just thrilled that I spent some time with you. And Messina is ducking me. And I wanted to point this out, and I want to say this before I go, and I hope you do have a minute because I want to pay tribute to someone who's very important to me because I wanted to get this on the radio this week. I talked about my kid in the rain, and I was thinking I had another thought. The reason I talked about my son in the rain is because Howard Scher was there in the rain. Howard Scher, if you've listened to me or know me, Howard and I became friends when I was the Skipjacks beat writer in 1984, 85, 86, 87, 88. You couldn't see the games great upstairs, and I was 15, 16 years old. I wanted to be with the fans, even though Jack Gibbons, who I saw on Saturday, and all my bosses, we got together, said, you need to be, you have to be objective. You can't be a fan. Um, which is amazing when the Orioles took my press pass, the things they said to me about objectivity, which was disgraceful. Still 20 years later, still disgraceful. Now it's been 18 years. But so Howard Scher was invited on today to talk some baseball, some football or whatever. But we lost a really, really iconic man and a wonderful man, a teacher from Howard County, a guy named Jeff Amder, who's been a lifelong friend of mine. And Alan, I don't know, you're old enough that you probably went to a skipjack game once just because you got dragged, right? He was the guy who sat
Absolutely.
in section 12 lower, 10, 12 lower, and he had a fireman's hat, and he was built a little bit like Danny DeVito and sort of short and squat, and he was a school teacher, and he would run up and down. And I'm only telling this story to people that don't know because I'm figuring anybody that's old enough fart that knows me knows he did this. Skipper's on a warpath. Go, go. Skipper's on a warpath. Go, go. So there's a video up now that I don't know. It was before Jamie Costello, but it felt like something Jamie Costello would do to profile Jeff Amdor in 1985 doing this thing, running around. And I was fresh to the beat. I was still at the News American when that video was made.
Wow.
And Howard is definitely in that video. Somebody said they saw me up there. I'll be really frank with you. I don't know that I sat there in 85. I don't know that I knew Howard until 86 or 87 when I got to the Evening Sun because I just don't know. I don't think I'm in the video. I know Howard's in it because I saw it. Somebody said they saw me, but it might have been a figment of their imagination, quite frankly. But Jeff Amder was a hardcore Oriole, Raven, Colts, Skipjacks, Clippers, Blades fan. And he was just the best kind of fan. And yeah, real fan Dan and the big wheel and the late great Bill Hagee, my friend, and whatever cheers I led or whatever the chain gang ever led, or Ozzy, who I featured a couple weeks ago. They had him, Ozzy Hazel, who's a super fan, wonderful guy, last games for 50 years. These great, great, great fans of Baltimore sports, iconic. Um, John Stedman used to do this thing called the Character Bowl, and it had nothing to do with your character. It had to do with you being a character. And my eighth grade English teacher, who recently reunited with me, actually this morning, literally this morning at 4 a.m. after the Ravens game, put a post up about Bud Paulino's Beer Garden in Highlandtown. That's where they hosted the Character Bowl, and it was for the biggest characters. The I didn't know any of these guys, but I always heard about Diz, the great Diz, and there were just all of these characters who were part of my radio show, Joe Fan and Broadway Joe, and all of these Whack Pack Howard Stern characters that I had. You were one of them, and we had Bob from Parkville, whose real name was not Bob, it was Roland. And we helped him find housing later in his life as a single gentleman. Ray Bachman was a part of that, who's fighting cancer right now. And I want everybody to give some love to Ray. But just old school and with people like you and people like Howard Scher, and my son's now 40. But we lost Jeff Amder over the weekend. And I hope the Orioles go out and win a World Series in his honor, because I know how much he appreciated 83. And he was a good man. And that video that I shared is important to me, as is, and Alan, maybe this will play right into the Oyster Tour. The Oyster Tour on day 4 led me down to Hamden. And my wife's like, dude, how are you going to eat 26 oysters in 26 days? And I'm like, well, I'm not eating them all raw. I'm going to eat them different ways, and they're going to be delicious. And I said to her, and I always tell her this, and I don't know if she buys off on all of it. I think she does this far into our relationship. I'm going to meet new people, and it's going to be fun, and something cool is going to happen, and you're going to get to pet a dog, and I'm going to see a pretty girl, and I'm going to meet a new fan or meet an old fan, or I'm going to take a selfie with somebody that's going to mean something to them, or somebody's going to come up and say, hey, Nestor, remember the time you Well, we got out to Hamden at 11 o'clock in the morning 3 Sundays ago, and we were having the most delicious oyster, a place called a black female-owned business next to the Royal Farms headquarters in Hamden, right on the avenue, hon, the Urban Oyster. I had a eggs Benedict oyster fritter. Not the best thing I had this month, but the second best thing I had this month. It was
nice.
really, really good. And on the way in, they were having a sale out in the middle of the avenue. It was Sunday morning, man. People just got stuff out there. And the guy has a whole bunch of sports stuff. And it's very jerseys, jackets, stuff, not the cards. But out there was this amazing Baltimore Skipjacks clock, red, white, and blue, Caps era, functioning clock, 2 AA batteries. I don't know how long to keep time with 2 AA batteries. My my wife's MacGyver. She'll figure out how to rig it and have it be electric. She will, or create some eternal battery that works on solar. I don't know, but I have a pennant clock of the Baltimore Skipjacks. And there's some reason that I got that the same month that we lost Jeff Amder. I'm going to tell you. And there's some reason that you're on right now. And some reason we're talking about going to the Bulls this weekend. And was it Anakin, or who was the slayer of dragons in the Star Wars thing? They are the evil empire, right?
They most
right?
certainly are. Let's say Skywalker. Let's go with Skywalker.
I got a guy named Luke I'm going with. Think about it. Just think about it. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
He is
Very
Alan
nice.
McCallum. I love you, Alan. I don't care who knows it.
Right back at you, man.
All right. I want to be your favorite non-tendered Venezuelan reporter. All right. So let me know when we can do a Venezuelan wing out in the Owings Mills library for Venezuelan players. Maybe we could do that. It's just a little section. Just me honoring Luis Suarez and Melvin Mora. We can bring Melvin out. What do you think?
Or one of his many children to represent him.
Well, when Suarez comes out of the bullpen on Thursday and saves our asses,
I don't know if he's
4
going to be able to play
scoreless innings, you watch.
I think he's slated to start game 1 of the second series. So
well, unless he saves your ass on Thursday, right? So let's figure that out. All right.
It's going to be fun.
I'd sing the Venezuelan national anthem, but I don't know it. He is Alan. I am Nestor. I have written a letter to David Rubenstein. None of that's tongue in cheek, I assure you, but some of this has been. And I do hope we get together next. I hope to be talking baseball with you a little longer, right? I mean, I hope
you
that
both, brother.
I'll drop the mic on this and just say I said to Luke, I hope we have some moments. Just hope we have some moments. They don't. It doesn't need to be a parade, but it needs to be better than Delman Young. That's all. We need to upgrade from that. That's all.
It has never been harder in the history of baseball to win the World Series, because there are so many hoops you have to get through. So nothing is assured. But hey, let's give it a ride and see where we go.
Something magic happens. I even talked about Kiko Garcia. I've shown off my 83 World Series pictures. I want to be the noise. I'm ready to go. We are Baltimore Positive. He's Alan McCallum. Stay with us. We have baseball ahead. I hope it's a lot. Stay with us.